Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're rolling up our sleeves for some real literary archaeology, digging into the hidden history of one of the most famous fantasy worlds ever created. We are, of course, talking about J.R.R. Tolkien's masterpiece, The Hobbit. But, actually, we're not talking about the one you probably have sitting on your bookshelf right now. You know, most casual fans have absolutely no idea that the story we all know today was heavily altered well after it was published, all to fit into a massive, evolving legendarium. To truly understand Middle-earth, we've got to look back at the original version of the story that launched it all. We're going to see exactly how and why the author went back in to literally rewrite his own history. It's a fascinating mystery that completely changes how we look at the foundations of modern fantasy. Section 1, an unexpected origin story. Let's start by looking at how this sweeping epic actually began. Before it was a massive multi-part saga, this was just a surprisingly innocent, standalone fireside tale that Tolkien read aloud to his kids. It all traces back to a sudden, random flash of inspiration. Picture this. It's the early 1930s. Tolkien is bored, marking exam papers, and he just jots down this iconic sentence on a blank page. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. He didn't even know what a hobbit was at the time. It was just a standalone fairy tale, completely separate from the complex, serious mythology he'd been privately tinkering with since 1917. So this wasn't a one-and-done manuscript, not at all. It was a constant evolution. We go from those 1930s children's drafts to the celebrated 1937 first edition. But the story didn't stop there. See, as Tolkien was writing his monumental sequel, The Lord of the Rings, he hit a snag. He realized his charming little children's book no longer fit the vast, dark universe he was building. So he executed some major textual revisions in 1947, put out a new edition in 1951, and, get this, even attempted a much darker revision in 1960. Moving right along to Section 2, the 1937 first edition. This original text presents a much lighter, casually magical picture of the world, which is entirely distinct from the grave, perilous Middle-earth we see later on. If we look closely at his early drafts, we find some absolutely wild Easter eggs that show just how fluid his ideas were in the beginning. Literary archaeologists poring over Tolkien's early typescripts found that he originally named the great dragon Prifdin. And the wizard we all know and love? His name was actually Bladorthin, while the name Gandalf was given to the lead dwarf. Right, so think about the Gandalf we all know, the serious, divine guardian. Well, the original wizard wasn't like that at all. He was basically just an eccentric old man doing parlor tricks. In 1937, Gandalf is described as a little old man who gets easily distracted blowing wildly colored smoke rings. The magic in this early version is super casual. We're talking trolls who forge swords, talking thrushes, and a wizard who relies on basic incantations rather than some sort of angelic divine authority. This earlier, lighter tone meant our protagonist, Bilbo, operated more as a classic picaresque trickster. Instead of being a weighty, prophesied hero, he was quite literally just hired as a burglar. He kind of blunders his way through these episodic dangers, relying heavily on sheer chance and cleverness to survive. It's very much like the trickster figures of ancient pagan myths, who would steal fire or cattle from the gods. Which brings us to Section 3, the Great Gollum Retcon. This is the biggest plot twist in the real-world creation of the book, and the absolute heart of those massive 1947 and 1951 revisions. The contrast between the original creature and the corrupted monster we know today is honestly staggering. In 1937, Gollum isn't corrupted by the ring at all. Wait for it. He willingly bets his magic ring in the riddle game, and when he loses and can't find it to pay up, he actually apologizes profusely to Bilbo and politely guides him out of the caves as a consolation prize. Seriously, there is absolutely no screaming of, "We hate it," to be found. And because Gollum changed, the author had to fundamentally change the nature of the ring itself to make his sequel work. In the original text, the ring is just a handy little trinket. But to align the story with the darker, looming threat of The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien had to completely rewrite Chapter 5. He made the ring an active, malevolent agent with its own dark will, and transformed Gollum into a tragic, addicted victim. Tolkien famously submitted these revisions to his publisher, who surprisingly just seamlessly incorporated them into the new edition. To understand why he went to such incredible lengths to revise his lore and maintain consistency, we need to look at Section 4, Drawing Middle-earth. See, he didn't just write words, he was the architect of an entire universe, utilizing a deeply multidisciplinary toolkit. Tolkien couldn't just invent a place. He had to map it, draw it, and trace the linguistic history of everyone who lived there. The visual and spatial reality of the world dictated the story just as much as the plot itself did.
What's genuinely incredible here is his dedication to immersion. When he created Thror's map, he envisioned a physical object that interacted with real-world light. He wanted the magical moon runes printed on the back of the page, so the reader would literally have to hold the book up to a light source to reveal the secret text, exactly like the characters in the story. Sadly, the publisher found this way too difficult and expensive to pull off in print at the time.
But even though it wasn't originally meant to be an illustrated book, the publisher was so charmed by his sketches that they went ahead and included 10 of his intricate black and white drawings, plus 2 end paper maps, right there in the first edition. Tolkien absolutely fussed over these details in dozens of letters to his publisher. He was deeply invested in exactly how the mountains, the dragon, and those cozy hobbit holes looked. Let's expand the view a bit for Section 5, Ancient Myths and Legends. We've got to look at the deep historical roots behind all this complex literary archaeology. As a professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford University, his deep passion for philology, which is the study of the history of languages, became the very foundation of his fantasy world. This means he didn't just borrow popular tropes like a lot of modern authors do. No, he built his world backward from languages he entirely invented himself, heavily relying on the historical mythologies of Northern Europe to anchor it all. He wove actual Old English epics, folklore, and medieval history directly into the DNA of the narrative. For instance, the whole central plot point of Bilbo stealing a cup and enraging the dragon Smaug lifted almost verbatim from the ancient epic Beowulf. The shape-shifting bear-man Bjorn perfectly reflects tales from the Brothers Grimm. And Tolkien even based the dwarven experience of being dispossessed from their homeland, along with their unique late autumn calendar, directly on medieval Jewish history. He literally lifted the names of his iconic characters straight from ancient Norse mythology. If you read the Poetic Edda, which is an Old Norse collection of poems, you will find a list of dwarf names that reads exactly like Thorn's company: Bifor, Bofor, Bomber, Thorin, Balin. And remarkably, Gandalf was actually the name of a Norse dwarf, which perfectly explains why Tolkien initially gave that name to the lead dwarf in his early drafts. Ultimately, while he loved consistency, he realized the original story's fairy tale allure was simply worth preserving. In 1960, he actually sat down to completely rewrite The Hobbit again, trying to make its tone, travel times, and geography perfectly match the grim, serious nature of The Lord of the Rings. But after just a few chapters, he stopped. Both he and the people who reviewed it realized that by stripping away the obtrusive narrator, the humor, and that casual magic, he was killing the very soul of the book. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought about the ever-changing nature of the stories we love. We so often think of published books as permanently carved in stone, but The Hobbit shows us that a story can actually be a living, breathing document, one that grows, adapts, and sometimes even rewrites its own past to make room for a larger, more incredible future. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the literary archaeology of Middle-earth, and keep exploring.